The afternoon sun hung low over the desert plains, a great molten coin sinking into the haze that shimmered above Red Mesa. Heat waves rose from the dust, twisting the air in ghostly ripples. The main street was nearly empty, a few wagons creaked by, and an old dog slept in the shade under the blacksmith's awning. From the porch of the sheriff's office, Sheriff Eli Cartwright watched the slow rhythm of the town he'd sworn to keep safe. His badge glinted dully in the light, worn smooth by years of sun and sand. He took a sip from his canteen, squinting down the road. That was when he saw it, a swirl of dust on the horizon, growing larger, faster. The distant rumble of hooves carried through the stillness. It wasn't a herd, not a posse. Stagecoach. And by the looks of it, coming in fast. Eli stepped down from the porch, resting a hand on the hitch rail. The horses came thundering into town moments later, lathered and panting. The coach pulled to a stop in front of the saloon, wheels crunching through the dirt. The driver climbed down, wiping his brow, his shirt stained dark with sweat. "Trouble," Eli called. The man shook his head, breathing hard. "Not for me, Sheriff. But I got something you ought to see." He gestured toward the carriage door. The folks nearby, the shopkeeper, 2 ranch hands, and the saloon owner, began drifting closer, curiosity sharp in their faces. The door creaked open slowly, and a frail shape appeared in the shadows. It was a girl, barely more than 16, maybe younger. Her dark hair was unkempt, her dress torn at the shoulder, one arm bound tight against her chest in a dirty cloth sling. She stepped down carefully, and for a moment her eyes, large, deep brown, wary, met Eli's. Her skin was the sun-burnished copper of the Apache. The crowd stiffened as one. The saloon keeper muttered a curse. The ranch hands exchanged glances. "She's Apache," someone whispered. "What the hell's she doing here?" Eli's boots crunched in the dust as he took a slow step forward. "Where's she from?" he asked the driver. The man scratched the back of his neck, looking away. "From Fort Bowie. The soldiers there didn't want her. They said she's half mad, won't speak much. Been wounded. They thought maybe she had kin further west." He paused, then added quietly, "No one wanted to keep her, Sheriff. So I brought her here." "Brought her here to what?" said the blacksmith, his voice sharp. "You think we got room for the likes of her?" "She's a child," Eli said. "A child whose people raided ranches not 2 years back." The man shot back. "You forget how many graves we dug for those raids." Eli didn't answer. His gaze stayed on the girl. She stood unsteady, the wind tugging at her hair, her face pale and hollow with exhaustion. Her lips moved, but the sound that came out was barely a whisper. "Water, please." The word caught the town's breath for a moment. She wasn't begging for food, or gold, or pity, just water. Eli reached for the canteen at his belt and handed it to her. She hesitated, her eyes flickering toward the men watching, then took it with both trembling hands. The moment she drank, her whole body seemed to sag with relief. But the murmurs started again. "Sheriff, don't," the storekeeper said sharply. "You start this, it won't stop. Next thing, her kin'll be following her here." Eli's eyes cut toward him. "You see any kin behind her? That ain't the point. The point is," another man said, "you're fixin' to make this town a target again." The air was tight now, charged with a quiet, ugly energy. Eli could feel it, the fear beneath the words, the hate that had built from years of raids, burned farms, lost kin. It had hardened these people, turned them meaner than they used to be. But fear was no excuse for cruelty. The girl swayed suddenly, her good hand clutching the hitch post for balance. She tried to straighten but her knees buckled. Eli caught her before she fell, the canteen slipping from her grip. Her breath came shallow, fast. "She's sick," Eli said. "Then take her out of town," the blacksmith growled. "We don't need her dying here." "Yeah," another man said, "if she dies, her people might think we killed her. Let the desert take her, that's what her kind do." Eli's jaw clenched hard. He looked at each face, the faces of men he'd drunk with, laughed with, fought beside when bandits rode in from the south. Men who now couldn't bear the sight of a broken girl. "Not a damn one of you will help?" he asked quietly. Silence answered. Eli's voice turned cold. "All right." He slid one arm beneath the girl's shoulders and lifted her easily. She was light, too light, her body limp against his chest. "Sheriff," the mayor's wife called from across the street, her apron dusted white from the bakery. "You can't take her in. Folks'll talk." "Let 'em," Eli said, walking toward his office. The townsfolk parted as he passed, murmuring behind him. Someone spat in the dirt. Someone else said something about losing faith in their lawman. Eli didn't care. The night came heavy and still over Red Mesa. Wind whispered through the cracks of the sheriff's office, rattling the window panes, carrying with it the faint scent of mesquite smoke from the outskirts of town. Sheriff Eli Cartwright sat at his desk, lamp burning low, head bowed over a stack of reports he wasn't reading. His mind was elsewhere, back in the corner of the room, where the young Apache girl lay asleep on the cot, wrapped in an old wool blanket. She had barely stirred since he'd brought her in. He'd managed to clean her wounds, feed her some broth from the cafe down the street, and bandage her arm with a fresh wrap. But she was weak, more from hunger and exhaustion than injury. When she slept, her face softened, and she looked like any other lost child. But when she opened her eyes, the fear came rushing back, as if the world outside his walls was nothing but danger. Eli leaned back, rubbing a hand over his face. The whispers had started that afternoon and grown louder through the evening. He'd seen the looks when he went to fetch bandages from Doc Henderson. He'd heard the hushed voices in the saloon when he passed by on patrol, words like, traitor, and, fool sheriff. He couldn't blame them entirely. The scars between settlers and the Apache ran deep, older than most of the buildings on that street. But something about this girl, about the way she flinched at loud sounds, the way she refused to speak above a whisper, made Eli certain that she'd already suffered enough for a lifetime. A soft rustle came from the cot. Eli looked up. The girl was awake, eyes glinting in the lamplight. She watched him silently, then sat up slowly, wincing as her injured arm protested. "Easy," Eli said, rising from his chair. He poured a cup of water and walked over, setting it on the small crate beside her bed. "Drink." She hesitated, then took the cup in both hands, drinking in slow, careful sips. When she finished, she whispered something in her language, a short, melodic sound, like a song half sung. Eli frowned softly. "Don't know what that means, but I reckon it's something kind." Her lips quirked faintly, almost a smile, and she nodded once. He sat down in the chair across from her, elbows on his knees. "You got a name, miss?" She was silent for a moment, then tapped her chest lightly. "Taya, Taya," Eli repeated. "Pretty name." He touched his badge. "Eli." She nodded again, repeating the sound carefully. "Eli." He chuckled softly. "Close enough." The moment hung between them, quiet and almost gentle, until the door banged open. Eli stood quickly, hand instinctively going to his revolver. 3 men stood in the doorway, the blacksmith, the saloon keeper, and the mayor. The lamplight from inside painted their faces in hard lines. "Evenin', Sheriff," the mayor said. His voice was calm, but there was a stiffness to it that told Eli this wasn't a friendly visit. "We need to talk." Eli crossed his arms. "Then talk." The blacksmith stepped forward, his fists clenched. "We been patient, Cartwright, but you're crossin' a line. You brought that Apache girl into town, and now you're keepin' her under your roof. Folks are uneasy." "Uneasy." Eli's voice was low. "You mean angry. Call it what you want," the saloon keeper said. "You know what her people done. You think her being a girl makes it different." Eli's jaw tightened. "I think it makes her innocent." The mayor sighed. "Eli, you know the way folks are. You can't change that overnight. But if you keep her here, you'll stir up more trouble than this town can handle. The decent thing, the safe thing, is to take her to Fort Duncan. Let the army deal with her." "And what'll they do?" Eli asked. "Throw her in a cage. Send her back to die." "That's not your concern," the mayor said. "Your job's to keep order." Eli stepped forward, his eyes cold and steady. "Then I'm doing my job just fine. 'Cause I ain't letting a half-dead girl get dragged out into the desert just 'cause you all can't look past her skin." The blacksmith's nostrils flared. "You best think careful, Sheriff. You protect her, you stand against this town." Eli didn't blink. "Then I stand." For a long moment, no one moved. The lamplight flickered, throwing shadows across the walls. Finally, the mayor sighed heavily and tipped his hat. "You're making a mistake, Eli. Don't say we didn't warn you." They left, the door closing behind them with a dull thud. Silence returned, thicker, heavier now. Eli turned back toward the cot. Taya was staring at him, eyes wide, fear and confusion mingling on her face. "It's all right," he said quietly. "Ain't no one gonna take you." She hesitated, then pointed to herself and to him, whispering, "Safe." "Safe," he said. "You got my word." That night, the sheriff barely slept. He sat near the door with his rifle across his lap, listening for any sound outside. Around midnight, he heard voices, distant and angry, men drinking and cursing his name in the saloon. He ignored it. He'd faced outlaws, bandits, and killers before. But this was different. This was his own town turning against him. By dawn, the desert was quiet again. The first rays of sun painted the sky in pale orange. Eli stood, stretched the stiffness from his shoulders, and turned toward the cot. Taya was sitting up, watching the light creep across the floorboards. When he smiled at her, she gave a small nod, as if understanding something wordless between them. He poured her a bit of water and handed her a piece of bread. She accepted both with gratitude, murmuring softly in her tongue before eating. "Thank you," she said suddenly, in English this time. The words were clumsy but clear. Eli blinked. You speak English." She looked down, nodding shyly. "A little," he grinned, shaking his head. "Well, ain't that something?" Before he could say more, a commotion sounded outside. Voices, angry ones. Eli's smile faded. He grabbed his hat and stepped out onto the porch. Half the town had gathered in the street, men with rifles slung over their shoulders, women clutching their children, everyone looking at him with a mix of fear and fury.